are that provided a bid to do the work and what price they gave it at. And so we are being told simply that they are all responsible under state law, that's a defined term, that they are all responsible bidders, that they all have responsible bids rather, and that therefore we are directed to have to take that lowest one because we have no other basis in our reports to say that we want to choose somebody else who is at a higher price because of other additional factors that have come into play. How convenient it is to be able not to have any of that information, so we are absolutely directed to having to take that lowest bid just because we have no information to say otherwise, and if we were to say otherwise with no other additional information, that we'd be putting the city in jeopardy of actually having somebody then complain that we are being arbitrary in how we are doing our selection of awarding a bid. Interesting. So let's continue on and hear what else unfolds.
That bond says a lot because they're taking the chance because they don't want to pay up to twice what the value of the project is.
Exactly.
So that is your full faith right there, is the financial security.
So,
and that kind of dovetails into a question I had, is that if we find out that somewhere along the way here that say that they're not able to get the bond that is required, or it turns out that they somehow or other do not qualify to be responsible as defined under the law, then it would come back to us, correct? Because I think that maybe happened about 3 years ago. There was some contract that was given out and it turned out that they were not a responsible bid at all, and so then we actually had to give it to somebody else. So
Correct.
that would come back to us if that were the case.
Mayor, in that case, the contractor couldn't get the bond.
Right.
And then we had to come back and then award to the second.
To the next
So
step.
if he could not produce the required bonds and enter into the contract, this would come back to you with we'd investigate the second low and bring that back.
Right. And so my question is, when I'm looking at this, because, you know, I was thinking about this very same thing that Mr. Rosbach was bringing up, is that about prevailing wage, is that they're like $50,000. The next, I mean, $50,000 less than the next closest bid. Do we have an understanding of what part of their bid actually is less than the other bids, to know how it was that they were able to do it for $50,000 less?
Mayor, we don't have specifics, at this point in time. In my look, just at the bid prices, it simply was an across-the-board, which means that he probably is doing a lot of the work himself as an individual rather than hiring laborers to do it like some of the others. And so maybe Mr. Urban is actually going to do some of the work himself, which can lower your overhead substantially.
Right, okay.
Which I'm surmising that just looking across it, because all of his bid prices seem to be lower than most of the others.
Okay, because, I guess I did receive a phone call today about this, and I didn't have much time to look into anything, but at the Secretary of State, I mean, this company was just formed, I think, in, early part of this year, 2009. And the last time when it was Urban Companies or something like that, it was inactive in 2007. So I guess I don't really know what they were doing in 2008 and really how much experience there is, and maybe they, I'm just trying to wonder and understand how it is $50,000 less. You've given one explanation, maybe because they've got a different way that they do their business, and that could very possibly be it. So, okay, thank you.
Now, of course, this brings up a good question as well, is exactly how many man-hours are being used in each of the bids, and exactly how many people are they looking to employ as part of these bids. Now, why is this a big question? Well, this might be actually part of a greater public policy issue for the council. currently, of course, many people are very well aware that there's a lot of different stimulus money that is out there at the federal level, and that the whole key point of the stimulus money is to try to get as much of this money out to as many people as possible to help to stimulate the economy. Now, one of that, looking at that public policy, what its core value is to say that if we have $50,000 and we are looking to put it into a project, do we want to take that $50,000 and put it all into the pocket of one individual to hire one individual to do the work and only have that benefit go to them? Or do we want to spread it out so that everybody gets a little bit of that to help to stimulate the economy through a broader number of people? So that if you take $50,000 and say, well, we're putting it towards a project, but we're putting it towards a project in a way that it creates a greater number of jobs in our community, 5 jobs versus 1. This kind of goes back to the same discussion that the council had when we were looking at how were we going to allocate the stimulus money that Maplewood was going to get, $163,000 approximately, for its portion of the community block energy grant money. And the council majority, of course, put the majority of that money, $70,000 of it, towards purchasing 2 boilers for City Hall, which results in jobs created of 0.77 jobs. Not even 1 job, 0.77 jobs. And that 30 or so $1,000 of that grant is to go towards administrative costs, overhead costs, which of course in our grant says 0 jobs produced. Whereas that money could have actually been funneled into other kinds of rehabilitation programs for some of our older housing, for energy efficiency, for leveraging money through the Energy Sense program that's available to homeowners, and be able to produce and work towards having more jobs produced in our local community for our trades and labor personnel, rather than just the 0.77 jobs that was what we ended up with. But the same kind of public policy philosophy could be looked at currently when we're looking at awarding bids on jobs that are being funded by City Hall. If indeed it is, as Mr. Chuck All infers, that this company was able to underbid all the other companies by $50,000 because indeed the principal is going to be doing all the work himself, basically with the shovel and backhoe. You got one guy taking care of the retaining wall, with maybe an occasional labor or 2, that is a finite set of jobs, basically 1 job, with the money going to 1 position. Whereas perhaps, again, this goes back to the question of whether or not there's an engineering on-staff engineer partied with this company or not, or whether SEH, as it does now sound, is going to be providing those engineering services and certification, or whether or not those other companies, that their bids, having been $50,000 more, that actually they're employing more people and putting more people to work rather than just one person doing the shovel work and the backhoe work. So again, those are some good questions, public policy questions that were not answered at the council, but sometimes in listening to the film footage in retrospect, come up with some ideas about maybe this is discussion that the council should have as we continue to move forward and looking at how we do our bidding process and how we also award bids, because I think there's many ways in which we can do more within our community in how we award our bids and what kind of scrutiny there is, what kind of public policy we are trying to enact through our bidding process. I mean, do we have in our bidding process any kind of recognition of trying to encourage companies that are woman-owned or who are owned by minorities? I don't know. This is the kind of purview that the staff has always retained total control of, and yet the council actually could develop public policy that would not interfere with the staff and the city manager in the process that they take for doing bidding, but the council could enact public policy that says that it is our public policy as a city that we want to incorporate in looking at our acceptance of a bid. We want to incorporate looking at how many jobs does this bid produce. How many minorities does it employ? Is it a woman-owned corporation? Are there other kinds of factors that the city council could say, as matter of public policy, we support and believe in? We currently, of course, have an ordinance on our book which requires the paying of prevailing wage. And of course, that has to be maintained. However, there are other public policies that the council could indeed put within a package to give staff and the city manager better direction in how we can help to use our city taxpayers' dollars to be able to support better public policy in how we indeed award our bids. So we have a little bit more film footage on this issue, and I do want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of On the Agenda in Review. I hope that certainly by the fact that we are looking a little bit more in depth at this issue and some of those public policy questions and some of the questions that could have been asked that weren't asked, that it will whet your appetite for wanting to watch the council meetings and start to think of the kinds of questions that if you were sitting on the council, what questions would you be asking? What questions would you want answers to? So, anyway, the control room tells me that they're ready with some more film footage. Let's take a look.
Move the staff recommendation to approve the resolution in our packet receiving the project bids for the Markham Pond retaining wall, City Project 0518, and awarding a construction contract to Urban Companies, LLC in the amount of $251,913.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second before us. Any further discussion? Mr. Jelly.
One more clarification. This retaining wall is actually on private property, correct?
It is on an easement on private property, yes.
All right.
And if we finally quit beating it
Any
to
other
death, it won't come
discussion?
back to us.
Any other discussion, Ms. Juneman?
I said if we finally quit beating it to death, maybe it won't come back to us.
Shove it under the rug. It works great every
I'm
time.
not saying that.
Nice.
Okay, no further discussion. Mr. Nephew, first to vote.
Aye.
Mayor votes no. Ms. Juneman?
Aye.
Mr. Jelly?
No.
Mr. Rossbach?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
So there you go. You heard the vote. 3-2. And anyway, we'll keep you appraised of how the retaining wall progress moves forward as we move into this fall, and hopefully it'll be finished in time. I think it's supposed to start sometime this fall. So anyway, now we have another topic that we have a little film footage on that we can cover in the last few minutes of our program. And this is another issue that there's been a lot of discussion about just recently at several of the past city council meetings or workshops. And that's with regard to what's going on at the former tourist cabin site in the Gladstone area. For those of you, of course, who may be keeping up on what's going on in the city politics of Maplewood, you're aware that a number of years ago, we were awarded a $1.8 million grant by the Met Council for certain road reconstruction